Good morning and welcome back. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to present you with a couple of tools that I think are very useful for doing the kind of order of magnitude thinking that are going to be central to the whole course, and indeed I think of as being central to the whole scientific enterprise. The idea here is that lots of times, as I've already mentioned, we want to be able to answer the question of what sets the scale of X, where X might be anything from how many porta potties you need at an inauguration to how many tons of fuel are needed to fly a A380 from Los Angeles to Paris, to the question of what the diameter of an elephant's leg needs to be so that it won't buckle under the weight of the elephant. And so, at any rate, lots of times we're not after decimal point accuracy when we try and think about problems of that variety. We just want to know what the orders of magnitudes are. And to that end, there are a couple of tricks, a couple of approaches that we're going to invoke. And you can see here, I've referred to this as my order of magnitude toolkit. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to focus on the first four items in this little vignette. So the first two really have to do with arithmetic. And when I say arithmetic, that's literally what I mean. So, we're going to, in a sense, we're going to try when we're doing numerical estimates. I won't always succeed in this, but this is my aspiration anyway, is numerical values, I'm going to assign them either they're going to be 1, or they're going to be few, or they're going to be 10. And this chart gives you a sense of how we assign numbers. So, 1 is anything between 1 and maybe 2. And then few might be a little tiny bit above 2, all the way up to maybe, let's say, 6 or something like that. That's going to be what we're going to call few. And then anything between, say, 7 and 10 we'll refer to as 10. And the thought is that the errors that one incurs by using this formulation end up canceling each other. And again, for doing order of magnitude work, it will be very useful and powerful for us to adopt this notion of when I look at a number, I'm going to assign it. I'm going to say either that's a 1, it's a few, or it's a 10. So given that, I have two key rules basically that I want to invoke. So, let's say that we were going to multiply two numbers that were both of order few. Then the rule that we're going to invoke and use over and over again is that few times few is 10. That may seem very crude, and in a way it is very crude, but as I already mentioned, it's actually very powerful as well. And then the other idea is that when I'm faced with 1 over few, I can rewrite that by using one of my favorite rules, which is, multiplying by 1. And so in this case, the multiplication by 1 is multiplying few over few, which is the same as 1. So I multiply by few over few, and that leaves me with few over 10. So basically, 1 over few is the same as few over 10. Few times few is 10. That's it. And you'll see this unfold repeatedly over the term. And then the next thing I wanted to say, so I said I had a number of different things that I wanted to address. The next one is, let's say that I don't know how to estimate some numerical value. I don't know what the magnitude is. And so the concept here is that I'm going to make a guess. And the way that I make such a guess is by trying to figure out what would be a lower bound. And when I say that, what I mean is that I come up, let's say I do it in orders, in orders of factors of 10. So I come up from below and I keep asking myself, is the number of interest bigger than this? And as long as I feel confident that the number of interest is bigger than my guess, then I go one more factor up in scales of 10 until I start to feel that little bit of uncomfortableness. Then I come from above and I bound and I keep saying, well, is it smaller than that? Let me give you an example, which is the diameter of the rotunda, I think is what it's called, at the Washington, D.C. Capitol building. So, I've seen pictures of it. I've actually been there, but, let's say just looking at pictures, is it bigger than a tenth of a meter? Yeah, it's clearly bigger than a tenth of a meter. Is it bigger than 1 meter? Yeah, it's bigger than 1 meter. But by the time I get to 10 meters, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't know. Maybe it's bigger than 10 meters. Maybe it's not. And the way I try to gauge my own confidence is, would I be willing to bet a month of my salary? And making bets is stupid. And so, a month of salary is enough skin in the game to really leave you feeling like a total idiot, and also feeling a lot of pain if you were to lose. And so I'm not willing to take that risk. So I'm going to use as my lower bound 1 meter. Now I'm going to come from above. So, is the diameter of the rotunda less than a kilometer? Yeah, surely it's less than 1,000 meters. It's less than 100 meters, but the next scale down is 10, and again, I'm not comfortable there, so I'm going to take it somewhere between 1 and 100. So my lower bound guess is going to be x low is 1 meter. My upper bound guess is going to be 100 meters, and the square root of that is going to be something like, let's see, on the order of 10. That would be the kind of guess that I would get if I were, sorry, I didn't say that right. So my lower bound guess is 10, my upper bound guess is 100, and that means their product is 10 times 100, so the square root of that is around 30. So that's going to be my estimate for the diameter of the rotunda. And as I show you here, this really comes down to basically averaging the exponents. In other words, if I'm going in powers of 10, then my lower bound guess has some exponent a low, my upper bound guess has some exponent a high. And the scheme that I'm presenting here, which comes from Sanjoy Mahajan, that's where I learned this anyway, is to average the exponents. So that's my second rule of thumb. So you can see here, that if I, for example, don't know the size of a virus, it's the same thing. The virus is going to be bigger than 10 nanometers. It's going to be less than 100 nanometers, although, given the fact that I'm doing this online is because of SARS-CoV-2, that one has a size of around 100 nanometers itself. At any rate, so for a phage, like I show you here, my guess is going to be that it's between 10 and 100, and so using exactly the same rule, the units are different here now, but I think it's bigger than 10 nanometers, smaller than 100. That leaves me with an estimate of 30 nanometers for the size of a phage, which is quite a reasonable guess. And then the last of the comments that I want to make that's also going to be really useful in our order of magnitude toolkit is what I'm going to refer to as Little's theorem. And if you want to, you can look this up online. There's a kind of interesting historical description of this on Wiki. Little's law is what it's referred to as. But for my purposes, I think it's best represented by this little diagram. So the way I think of it sometimes is I imagine some tube, which you see here, and I'm putting ping pong balls in the tube, and I'm inserting them at some rate r, number of ping pong balls per minute or per day or per whatever. And so every time I push one in, another one comes out on the far side. So there's a certain rate at which we put them in, and so the Little's law tells us that the rate at which I load or exit the ping pong balls is going to be related to the number that are inside of the tube, which is the number in the reservoir, divided by the residence time. So another way of rewriting that would be to say that R times T is equal to N. So why would that be? The rate at which I'm putting them in is some number per minute, and then the lifetime, the residence time, is this time that I'm referring to as T, and that tells me, that combination tells me the population size. Well, let's try that out in the context of the education of a college student. So, at Caltech we have, I'm going to, for the sake of estimate, say that there are 200 students that come per year, so that's my rate of matriculation. And the time in college is 4 years. So if I take my 4 years times 200 per year, that gives me a population size, a student body size of around 800. So that's an example there, and maybe I'll come back to it later, but I think it's very fun to think about the dynamics of one of the most beautiful cells in mammals, but I'm thinking in humans in particular at this point. But we have these photoreceptors, and the photoreceptors have these outer segments which have a bunch of disks which are populated by rhodopsin molecules. And the thing that's interesting is that these disks are moving to the right in this figure and basically coming off the far end, and so there's about a 10-day transit time, and so that means that one of these disks is gobbled up roughly on average every 15 minutes. There's a similar story for the life of a red blood cell. You can take a screenshot of this and try to work it through for yourself. But the main point is that in all three of these cases, the college students, the life of an hour segment, or the life of a red blood cell, it will have a similar story for mRNA production and degradation and population sizes and so on. That one we can kind of do in our heads. If we think about E. coli, the total number of mRNAs, let's say, is 3,000, and the lifetime of an mRNA is about 3 minutes. So that means that 3,000, which is number, lifetime is 3 minutes, so that's the residence time, and so that gives me about 1,000 mRNAs being synthesized per minute. So that's a number that we can get from Little's theorem that can be useful to us. So just to recap, I had various ideas about an order of magnitude toolkit, and what you can see here is that we explored these few, and I left for later the notion of dimensionless ratios, which is another very powerful tool in this whole discussion.